It's the Bradfield Weather Podcast, brought to you by McAllen Construction. McAllen Construction, from the first dig to the last nail. And by Action Carpet and Floor Covering of Simsbury, a family-run business there for you. I am Dan Lovallo. He is meteorologist Bradfield. We are putting this podcast together on Valentine's Day, February the 14th. Brad, happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you, Dan. I thought you'd never say it.
Well, let me tell you, I don't know about Valentine's Day, but this has been some February, and now we were talking before we started recording. We've got 2 storms to deal with. What's going on?
Oh my goodness, Dan. You know, it's starting out when you average it all out for, as you said, today is Valentine's Day, the 14th. So we've had 2 weeks of February, and when you average it out, it's about normal. We've had about normal temperatures, and we've had about normal snowfall. Actually, it's about a half an inch above normal snowfall. I think at Bradley, as of this morning, we're at 7.4 inches for the month. But what's turned out to be a normal start to the month, Dan, could flip this month to extraordinary in what I'm seeing over the next couple of weeks. I mean, we've got 2 significant winter storms, and we've got a very, very cold weather pattern setting up for the time of year.
What I find interesting, Brad, is, and you had called this back in January, we were not going to have a January thaw. And normally when you get into February, because the days are getting longer, the sun is getting higher in the sky, you get at least some days in the 40s. But for January and February this year, we have struggled on a daily basis to even crack the 30-degree mark. Why? What's going
Yeah,
on?
well, Dan, I was saying that to Sandy the other day. There have been winters recently that I've gone through the winter. You know, I might put the winter coat in the back seat of the car, you know, in case you break down or something like that. You've got a winter coat and you've got a wool hat and you got some good gloves. You know, the normal things that you would do to take precaution and be smart in a New England winter. But the last few winters, I've worn my winter coat very rarely, and I've worn my ski hat very rarely, and I've worn gloves very rarely. But as you say, this winter it's been more of a staple. And when you look at it, Dan, and you remark about the longer days, the more steep solar angle, the fact that many times in February, especially as we get toward this part of February, the middle and end of the month, temperatures popping into the 40s frequently. Well, I just give you a little sneak preview here, Dan. I'm going for 20s on Monday with winds gusting over 40 miles per hour for highs. I'm going 20s on Tuesday for highs. I'm going 20s, maybe only near 20 on Wednesday for highs. And on Thursday, I'm going for highs of 18 to 24. And that's not all we're going to get next Thursday. It could be raging snowfall as well. So, really, what we're looking at here, Dan, is just the orientation of the ridge trough process in the Northern Hemisphere and how it works around the Northern Hemisphere globally, not just regionally, but globally. And we know we have to look out into the tropical Pacific waters for La Nina and El Nino, and whether it's ENSO neutral out there or whatever. And what we've always talked about is when we tend to go ENSO neutral, that is the jet stream orientation that gives us plenty of cold and a favorable storm track. And we were talking about going into this as we go from a La Nina to a weakening La Nina toward this ENSO neutral pattern. And we're in it now, and it looks like we're going to be in it for the rest of the winter. So, late February and into March as well, Dan. And we're in a pattern where it's going to be cold, at least with relation to average. I mean, you get this bitter cold air coming down around the winter solstice when you don't have any solar radiation per se, or nearly as much as you do when in February, and especially March, when the sun gets more overhead in more direct angles of solar radiation, it tends to be much milder. But when you look at what it is with relationship to what's average for the date, we are looking at some really cold stuff coming in. You'll notice it next week, and also in addition to that, Dan, the favorable storm track, which brings snow to ice to rain with this first one, and then it brings possibly significant snow with the second one. I don't want, some of the models I'm looking at this morning are beyond the pale almost. And I think it would sort of be irresponsible for me to be talking about it uh, because people will take what I say or what we say verbatim and say, Brad Field said 3 feet of snow. So I'm not going to really go into that kind of detail, but the weather pattern I will say is very exciting.
Okay, well, let's start then. And again, we're putting this podcast together on Friday, February the 14th. Let's begin with storm track number one. What do you have?
All right, the storm number one, Dan, hits on Saturday, February 15th, uh, starting between 4 and 7 in the afternoon. That storm should yield for most of us, and we'll get more specific with the model breakdown and everything, but for most of us, it should yield 3 to 5 inches of snow, basically Saturday evening to maybe a couple of hours past midnight into Sunday morning. So that should be all snow. Then we get into the various flavors of winter. We go from snow to ice pellets to, worst of all, freezing rain, which are liquid raindrops that do not have time to freeze into an ice pellet as they move down through the atmosphere, but they become super cooled. And then they hit a ground environment where the temperature is at or below 32 and they ice up instantly. So winter storm watches are up for Connecticut, Dan, and the reason was they said for 4 to 7 inches of a wintry mix of snow and sleet, but there could be a couple of tenths of an inch of ice accruing on top of that, which would really foul up driving late Saturday night and through the morning hours of Sunday. So that's the basic arching overview of storm number one. But I can kind of go into some detail of
Yeah.
where the storm is and where it's going.
Yeah, if you could do that, give us the specifics.
Yeah. Well, right now, Dan, this afternoon, we've got the snow cover through most of Connecticut out there. We've got the sun, and the temperature went down to much colder levels last night. We got back down into the 20s. A lot of wind today, a lot of wind. We're going to have gusts up around 40 miles per hour again, transporting in the colder air. You're really not going to see it because the solar radiation today of the steepening sun angle is going to kind of offset the cold air advection. So I think temperatures today, for the most part, will stay between 28 and 34 degrees. But by this evening, we're going to see high pressure settling in between Buffalo and Syracuse. Brisk northwest flow will be diminishing through the overnight hours tonight. Tomorrow morning, around 7 o'clock, a storm system will emerge from the Texas Oklahoma panhandle. For us, we will have high pressure over New Hampshire. It should be a cold morning. It will be a little bit less cold than it can be because I do think we'll have cloud cover which will act as sort of an insulating blanket. So instead of the low going down towards 0 tonight, the low will probably be in the maybe the 10 to 15 range, 8 to 14, something like that. Now, by tomorrow evening, Saturday evening around 7 p.m., the storm is into western Kentucky. Snow has spread into Connecticut. Again, the starting time between 4 and 7 tomorrow evening. Then it's going to snow pretty hard tomorrow evening. Now, by Sunday morning, the storm center will be located around Cleveland. Now, this is not a classic snow route for us. I mean, you've got western Oklahoma to western Kentucky, and then up toward kind of swerving to the northeast up toward Cleveland. For us, we will see from that storm in Cleveland at 7 in the morning on Sunday a warm front strung out through. It will come out from southern New Jersey and kind of parallel the southern New England coastline. That is the surface warm front. So to the north of the surface warm front, it'll still be cold, and we will be to the north of the surface warm front because that warm front will be from, say, Atlantic City to south of Nantucket. So it'll be sitting there. We're still talking about low-level cold air, but up at cloud level, the warm air will be streaming in. So picture this. The cold air molecules are molecularly more dense, so they're down near the ground. So the warm air is less dense, or quote, lighter, if you will. So the warm air comes up and over the cold air. And so there's these layers in the atmosphere where it's above 32. So you get the snowflake leaving the cloud and it goes through one of these layers and it melts, or at least partially melts. Then it goes into a colder layer again and it freezes up. So what do you have then? You have these various precipitation types like ice pellets, or we call it sleet sometimes, or grapple, where you get a partially melted snowflake that refreezes, but it has the liquid on it. So it refreezes as it goes into the colder air. As the colder air erodes and becomes shallower and shallower, it does not have time to freeze into an ice pellet. So what happens? You've got the snowflake coming from the cloud, going into a warmer layer, it melts. Then it goes into a colder layer, it starts cooling again, it gets super cooled, but it does not have time to freeze into an ice pellet. It hits the ground and ices up instantly on surfaces, power lines, tree limbs, your mailbox, shoveled driveways, and that is freezing rain. And if we do get this potential for a few tenths of an inch of ice, Sunday morning could be a skating rink in Connecticut, places north of Interstate 84. I do expect at 7 in the morning, north of Interstate 84 on Sunday, it'll surface temperatures to be between, say, 29 and 31, sort of right around 32 along I-84. And then to the south, down toward I-95, I expect temperatures to be 33, 34 degrees. So Saturday night, Dan, we go from snow to ice pellets to freezing rain to rain, and that transition happens south to north across Connecticut, with northern Connecticut still getting ice at daybreak on Sunday. So that's kind of the overall track of the storm and the different flavors of the storm. So I can break it down here with the models if you want me to go into that a little bit.
Yeah, if you could do that, Brad, show us what the models are saying.
Well, the two I'm mainly looking at here, Dan, for this first one, the short fused models don't really go out far enough yet to get into Sunday. They will later today, but we have to kind of adhere to what we've got. So I'm using the GFS and the European models right now. So between now and Sunday morning at 7 a.m. And again, I'm not expecting the snow to begin until 4 to 7 Saturday evening. So this would be Saturday evening, Saturday night into Sunday morning. The GFS has 3.1 inches of snow in Hartford, 3.7 inches of snow in Waterbury, 2.9 inches of snow in Norwich, and 2.4 inches of snow in Bridgeport. So you look at that and you say, even in a worst case scenario, for snow lovers, the GFS is predicting a general 3 to 5 inches. The lollipops, if you will, of heavier are up your way, Dan, in the Northwest Hills, where the GFS has around 6 inches of snow and ice pellets accruing. Then on top of that, you're going to get freezing rain. So this is a significant storm. The European has slightly higher levels of snow. The European has 4.4 inches of snow from Saturday afternoon to Sunday morning in Hartford, 4.9 in Springfield, 5.2 in Waterbury, 4.4 in Norwich, and 4.4 in Bridgeport. So that kind of gives you an idea. Most of us will get 3 to 5. Some of us might get 6, and then ice, and then rain, and then a hard freeze. So, my advice to you is get it off your walkways and your driveway on Sunday afternoon. I mean, even if you have to go out and it's raining, I would get it off because it's going to freeze into a glacier on Sunday night. And then it's not going anywhere because Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday are all in the 20s for highs at best. So it'll be a very wintry scenario in Connecticut right on through the middle of next week. And that doesn't even include what's coming on Thursday.
Brad, it might be beneficial that President's Day is on Monday for a lot of people because there's a good chance with what's going on, they wouldn't be able to go to school or work anyway.
Well, yeah, I mean, I do think that if you cannot get the snow, and here's another caution, Dan, this is going to be heavy slop because you're going to get the snow and then it's going to sleet into it. Then it's going to freezing rain into it. Then it's going to rain into it. So the snow is going to act like a sponge and squeeze it all up. So, you may go out and see on your driveway 3 or 4 inches of this stuff and think, this is not a big storm. I can get rid of this. But it is going to be heavy, heavy, heavy. And then when you get it off the driveway, wherever you put it, it is going to freeze into an ice castle. So, yeah, if you do not get the snow removed on Sunday, it is going to be there for a long, long time.
Well, that said, Brad, let's go to our On the Weather Map segment, post storm number 1. What does that look like?
Well, it's President's Day now, Dan, as you say. Monday, we've got the storm number 1 that comes through is up in Nova Scotia. Very, very strong northwesterly airflow. I checked out the European model for the afternoon high temperature reading. 23 Fahrenheit on Monday. So you see what I'm talking about here. The Sunday night going down to an average low of around 10. Monday, an average high of 20 to 25. So that stuff that fell over the weekend will be concrete. Tuesday, it's still windy. We're watching an Arctic high drop down out of Manitoba province in Canada. Sunshine here, still windy, temperature of 20. Wednesday, Dan, that sprawling Arctic high is now centered out around North Dakota. This is a first for the Bradfield Weather Podcast. We are going to talk about the new geographical naming. We will have low pressure emerging from the western Gulf of America on Wednesday. high temperature, Dan, of 19 Fahrenheit on Wednesday. Thursday. So now we've got this storm coming out of the Western Gulf. Thursday, it's abreast of Wilmington, North Carolina. It's 15 degrees Fahrenheit here for the high temperature, according to the European model. The storm tracking from the Western Gulf up to the Carolina coast. Then guess where it goes, Dan?
Your famous spot, right?
The benchmark.
The benchmark.
It goes to the benchmark, 40 north, 70 west. It goes to the benchmark or maybe a little southeast of the benchmark. That will produce heavy snow somewhere in southern New England. Will it be Connecticut? It might be more displaced over toward Rhode Island and southeastern Massachusetts. We're going to have to see on this one, but there are potentially big snow accumulations. Now, it's way too early and it's irresponsible to say that this will happen, but the storm will be there. Now, whether it's taking the track that's most beneficial to us, getting a major, major snowfall, I don't know. But the models this morning are saying, yes, Brad, it will. Both models, the GFS and the European, and I only had a brief time to look at the Canadian, but they're all on board with this storm.
Okay.
And a storm is coming. Now, just where it sets up and where the specifics are, where, who gets 6 to 12 inches, who gets 12 to 18 inches, whatever the case may be, we're going to have to fine tune that and refine it. So I would certainly think you will not be hearing from us, Dan, on Friday of next week. You will be hearing from us probably on Wednesday of next week, trying to set the stage for this storm that'll be coming in. But Dan, this is really interesting and exciting here because the European, now we're looking back at the 0Z European. So what does that mean? That means the 7 p.m. European model from last night. And that model compared to the GFS model, the GFS model is way more prolific. But in the 24-hour period from 7 a.m. Thursday of next week to 7 a.m. Friday of next week, the European has 3.7 inches in Hartford, 5.9 inches in Norwich, 4.9 inches in Waterbury, and 6.8 inches in Bridgeport. So you might say, why does it have more at Bridgeport? Well, that was the idea I was telling you about. Big storm, but will it be shifted more to the south? Will that be the swath of heavy snow going up through Rhode Island and Cape Cod? The GFS says, wait. The GFS, the 7 p.m. model from last night, has 11.3 inches in 24 hours there in Springfield, Mass. 10.8 in Hartford, 11.5 in Norwich, 9.6 in Waterbury, and 7.3 in Bridgeport. Now, when I got up this morning, Dan, that was the latest model I could look at, and I went, wow, that's a pretty good 24-hour snowfall. They're predicting around a foot about a week out. Then the 1 a.m. computer model came out of the GFS. So this was from 1 a.m. today, not 7 p.m. last night. They went even higher. The GFS for the latest one I have has 11.7 inches in Hartford, 10.5 in Waterbury, 13.6 in Norwich, and 10.9 in Bridgeport. So these numbers are not going to happen.
No.
They're not going to come out like this. But the point is, there is big snow potential, Dan. So compare the two storms. This first one is the kitchen sink storm, the slop storm, the heavy, and I don't want to say heart attack snow, but heart attack snow. I mean, if you're not in good shape, you do not want to be shoveling this snowfall this weekend. Now, the next one, the one coming next Thursday, looks to be fluff. I mean, you could have 1 or 2 feet of fluff coming from that one. So, we're going to have to refine that as we get closer, but it's pretty darn wintry out there now looking around the landscape of Connecticut. Just wait till the weekend's over and then just wait until about a week from now. I think it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better.
Well, all these people who have rooted for an old-fashioned winter, they certainly have got it this winter, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, Dan. And the proverbial best is yet to come.
Well, on that note, and we're putting this podcast together on Valentine's Day, February 14th, what does our immediate forecast look like?
All right. One thing I learned in Meteorology 101, Dan, is always look out the window. So I have mostly sunny written down here, but when I look out the window, I think I'm going to say a mix of clouds and sun. Windy and colder today. Temperature 28 to 34 with the wind gusting to around 40 miles per hour. Tonight, variable cloudiness. And what did I teach you about that, Dan? Variable cloudiness.
Ooh.
We don't know what it's going to be.
Well, right, exactly.
Clear. It could be overcast. What I do know is it will be much, much colder. So I will say colder tonight, Dan. Variable cloudiness. Colder tonight, Dan, with diminishing wind. Temperature moving down into the teens. Saturday, February 15th, thickening clouds. Snow toward dark. Temperature 28 to 34. Saturday night, 3 to 5 inches of snow through the evening and past midnight. 6 inches of snow in the northern hills. After midnight, snow to ice pellets, to freezing rain, to rain. The transitioning happening south to north across the state, so that by Sunday morning when the sun comes up, it's still icing in northern Connecticut, north of I-84. I think it'll be between 29 and 31 Fahrenheit with either ice pellets or supercooled raindrops freezing on contact Sunday morning. So freezing rain. South and east of I-84, I think it'll be just above freezing, 33, 34, something like that, with just liquid rain coming down. The whole process changing to rain and ending during Sunday midday. 36 to 42 for the high. That is the time to get out and get rid of the snow. Get the snow off places you don't want it because it will freeze into a block on Sunday night. Flurries, windy, much colder on Sunday night. President's Day, partly sunny, windy, 26 to 32. Tuesday, sunny and in the 20s. Wednesday, sunny and in the 20s. Thursday, snowstorm, 18 to 24.
Wow. Variable cloudiness. I can drive a 10-wheeler through that loophole. I'll have to remember that. Well,
yes, Dan. But hey, it's this weather pattern has me smiling.
It's
I mean,
wild.
we gotta help our friends and
Right.
the old folks and stuff.
Yes.
Make sure they have their medications and
Yep.
everything they need because it's going to be hard to get around some of these days. That's for sure.
Okay. Well, Brad, to you and Sandy, our podcast and radio audience, be safe, be well. We will keep you updated. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast and also go for updates, bradfieldweather.com. Be well, my friend.
You too, Dan, and to you and your Valentine, Susan. Have a happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you, Brad. The Bradfield Weather Podcast has been underwritten by McAllen Construction. McAllen Construction from the first dig to the last nail. And by Action Carpet and Floor Covering of Simsbury, a family-run business built for you. Be well, everybody.